When you compare that to the days on market, the drop from 42 days on market average to 19 is telling of what we've been talking about the last few weeks of good properties are going, that we're seeing multiple offers, that we're seeing off-market deals. I know I had a client last week missed a couple of offers on properties where multiple offers and went in on a property pre-market before it ever listed.
You're listening to the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast, your go-to source for all things Canadian real estate. And now, here are your hosts, Paul Stevenson and David Warren.
Hello and welcome back to the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast. My name is Paul Stevenson. I am a mortgage agent level 2, and I'm joined as always by David Warren, owner and mortgage agent level 2 at Referral Mortgages. David, how are you doing? What's going on over there?
I'm good. We're a sunny Tuesday morning, Thursday. I don't even know where the heck I was getting Thursday from. I guess it was a long Monday. Holy smokes.
Ooh,
we got some extra sunlight in the evenings. I couldn't believe it yesterday leaving the office. I actually felt motivated to get things done after work as opposed to just being like, all right, it's basically bedtime.
Yeah, see, I was the opposite. I was working and then I realized it was still daylight, but then, you look at the clock, it's 6:30 and you're like, wait a minute. Hey, well, wait a minute. I thought it was 4. Before we get into it, we just want to let everyone know, we want to first of all say thank you very much to our sponsors and also to our listeners. Thanks for tuning in every week. And if you ever have any questions about mortgages, real estate, you can reach out to Dave and I. We're always available and our contact information is in the description. Dave, I have to say, first of all, congratulations to you and congratulations to Referral Mortgages and congratulations to me as well.
I was going to say, congrats to you too.
I just want to share that Dave and I were actually at a national conference last week with all of Centum. So Centum is a network that has over 2,200 agents. So Dave and I were both recognized for our work in 2024, and Referral Mortgages was top 3 in Canada for
number two. Don't stick me in third.
Top 3, yeah. Number 2 in Canada. Well, you can say it, David. How did you do?
Yeah.
What was it?
Yeah, I was happy to. We were very happy to come second in the country with the network for volume, for brokerage volume. So that's volume funded or loans funded across Canada, and number 3 in number of transactions across the country. So we're very happy to receive that recognition, which is great. And then obviously yourself and I for personal volumes, which is always nice to be recognized, for the good hard work that we put in.
Yes, yeah, no, it does. It does feel nice to be recognized. You always think like, who cares about these awards? But when you actually get one, you're like, oh, it's nice to be recognized, even if just to kind of
nice little pat on the head.
Yeah.
Pat on the head.
Thank you to our listeners. Thank you to all of our clients, obviously, for your support as well. And let's get into it, David. I pulled up the February stats. They're out. We were talking about this last week that the numbers would be out. And very interesting. I would say there's some things that I'm not surprised at, others that I'm very surprised at. So here's kind of an overview. In February, 1,668 new listings. Benchmark price for a single family, $719,800, $720. Days on market, this was the biggest one for me, dropped from 42 to 19 days on market. So that's a wild shift. And that's kind of what we expected. I thought it'd be under 30, but 19 is pretty dramatic. Active listings, 3,735. Benchmark price for an apartment, $459,300. And total property sold, 809. Moving on to some of the more kind of getting into a bit more of the details. Months of inventory. For anyone who's listening, I would suggest going to YouTube and taking a look at these charts because they're pretty, the numbers themselves are fairly staggering and you can really see the trend here. Months of inventory, February year to date, 4.8 months. That's up from 2.9 in 2024 and 2.9 in 2023. So, pretty consistent over the last couple of years and then a big bump this year. Active listings, February year to date. Look at 2024 and 2023, 1932, 2025, 3,500 active listings in February. So big jump. And lastly, sales activities. 2023, 1328, 2024, 1545, 2025, 1470. So that's sales activity is probably the only thing. Surprising it's down, to be honest. But that's the only thing that seems to be fairly consistent. Everything else is a huge uptick in February.
Yeah, the months of inventory is interesting. When you compare that to the days on market, the drop from 42 days on market average to 19 is telling of what we've been talking about the last few weeks of good properties are going, that we're seeing multiple offers, that we're seeing off-market deals. I know I had a client last week missed a couple of offers on properties where multiple offers and went in on a property pre-market and before it ever listed. So I think that's what's showing that days on market drop, which I would anticipate if that trend continues of that, the properties going quickly, that we'll then see that number of months inventory start decreasing. The fact that 19 days on market, really that's, we're still seeing 10 days of conditions. So, if you've got 10 days of conditions and that 19 days includes that 10 days. So really it's listed for 9 in 9 days, conditional offer, and then, ticked over to sold 10 days later is kind of, where that trend is. So really things are only staying on the market for 9 days based on that stat when you kind of remove that 10 days of conditional period, which goes to show you, there's properties out there for people to be looking at. So still take your time. Don't rush into things. If it's not the right time for you, be patient. With 4.8 months of inventory, there is stuff for you to look at. And this is before people really start ramping up those listings come spring. And you can still get the, condition of financing, but the days on market is showing, make sure you still are prepared, when going in and looking at property.
Yeah. And something else to consider, we say this every spring, but for all those new active listings, guess what? New active buyers too, right? Like people aren't listing. Most people are not listing and then going to renting or moving outside the city. I would say, the majority of those 3,500 listings are also now active buyers. So everyone who was looking to get into the market in the spring, who was currently renting, we kind of touched on this with Kevin last week, but we now have a new flood of buyers that are now probably a bit more aggressive, maybe even in their buying because they have a property to sell as well. So they're, assuming their property gets sold in, as you said, 19 days or, days on market, they now have to be super aggressive on their offers, which is going to make that days on market even shorter likely. So it's a very interesting, like these stats, the stats don't lie, obviously, but when you look at them, it's hard to piece together like what sort of impact is going to have on the market because there's so many different things that are kind of conflicting almost, But I think that active listings means, like I said, active buyers, which is probably going to shorten that days on market would be my guess.
Yeah. And, exactly as you said, like, and what Kevin was even instructing people, listing, your property and going and buying. So that's also likely to what's demonstrating or showing the days on market decrease is that people, are listing their property. Once it's sold, then they're quickly buying something as well. So they're not waiting that timeline out or that time period out. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting. As far as like how that continues, we're still seeing the home prices though maintaining, even though that 4.9 or 4.6 months of inventory, single family homes, year over year is just up a touch, up 1.3%. But the townhouse row unit category year over year is down pretty dramatically. So in that townhouse row unit for February, year over year, February was down 11%.
Yeah.
So that's a double digit decrease in that category. So certainly it could be a good time when just looking at the stats and looking at the price points, that townhouses could present a good opportunity if that's something that you're looking at, or if somebody's debating between a condo and are thinking that they can't qualify or buy a townhome, that might be something to maybe look at with that drop in value of 11%, could open that up because you're not having those condo fees perhaps on some of those towns.
Yeah, that to me was also one of the more surprising. Obviously, the number itself is fairly staggering at 11%, but like the townhouse row units, those are kind of your typical starter home, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Like that was my first home, your first home, I believe. The one you bought in Barhaven was like that was kind of the first home if you want to get into the market. a really good starting point. So having a 11% discount really from where prices were a year ago is a really good opportunity for buyers looking to enter the market. And you don't have to, I think there's this common misconception. We talk to we talk to first time buyers all the time that are looking in that 650 to 8 range. And if that's, if you can afford it and you find the home, you can do that. But if you're looking to just get into the market and it seems daunting to get the average home price, it's 720,000. Like, how are we ever going to buy a home? We'll start small. I started with a $212,000 townhome, and sold it 7 years later for $217,000, but there was enough enough principal pay down just over that 7 years that I then was able to sell it, take that money, use it as a down payment on, a semi-detached. And then same thing, like you just kind of have to, if you want to get into the market, you have to slowly build that portfolio. And if you want to enter at a price that you can afford today and reassess in 5 years and 10 years and just, get the ball rolling. Cause you're right. Like looking at a $720,000 purchase is quite daunting if you're just looking at the average single family home, but you don't have to have a single family home to start. If you want to get into the market, start small and let it grow over time. Buy real estate and wait. Hey, Dave, don't wait to buy real estate. That's what they say.
Yeah. I mean, 438 for the average townhome price point is pretty attainable for first time home buyers that we see come across our plate. And as far as, managing payments versus what they'd be paying for rent, minimum down payment, on that, a minimum down payment for an owner occupied is 5% down. So you're looking at 21,900 as far as, what that minimum down requirement is. The land transfer tax rebate as a first time home buyer, you're able to negate most of the land transfer tax on that purchase price as well, where you're, really not much out of pocket. And so it's certainly a category where if I was a buyer or I was a realtor working with a first time home buyer, I would certainly be exploring that category. And it's one where we've seen in the past big gains as well, as far as appreciation. And so certainly something where, like you're saying, as for a first time home buyer to get in, maybe do some work to that property to spruce it up. You're going to see a pretty good lift on that over time.
Yeah. I mean, look at that. Like I was saying, that $212,000 townhome that I bought is now over $400,000. And that was, 11, maybe 12 years ago, 13 years ago. So at 438, minimum down payment would be just under 22,000. And your monthly payment based on kind of average rates today for an insured mortgage would be $23.45. So, rent right now, we actually have the stats for that, but the average rent currently in Ottawa is, hold please. In Ontario is $23.29. So almost bang on. So, a starter home is the same price as the average rent. So there you go. Obviously there's additional costs associated typically with owning a home, but just in general, very comparable. So something else I wanted to touch on quick, Dave, an article here about Canadian unemployment. So the reason why I feel this is relevant is because we do have the Bank of Canada rate announcement tomorrow, which would be today if you're listening to this. And all of these factors obviously play into that decision. Now, I think we're both in agreement that we're going to see at least a quarter point tomorrow. There's speculation there might be a half point. I would assume probably a quarter point and then a reassessment again in April, I think is the next announcement after that. But I just want to read this. The headline is Canadian unemployment stalls as more young adults opt out of the workforce. So this was by Better Dwelling. And it says the latest report from Stats Canada shows that headline employment data remain unchanged in February with job numbers and the unemployment rate holding steady at 6.6%. However, a deeper look into the data reveals concerns about declining workforce participation, especially among young adults. So the key findings of this were that the employment growth, Canada added just 1,000 jobs, reaching 21 million total. Given the agency's margin of error is 32 times larger than this, a single month change is statistically insignificant. So yeah, exactly. Provincial impact, the only province with a significant employment decline was Nova Scotia, which saw a 0.8% drop. So that's 4,300 jobs. Other provinces remain largely stable. Unemployment rate remained at 6.6%, which is 0.7% or percentage points higher than a year ago. The increase is nearing the threshold that economists associate with a recession. So that would be a 0.5 point rise over 12 to 18 months. And then it says, while Canada's population grew by 47,400 people, the net labor force shrank by 16,800. The biggest concern is among young adults. Despite adding 5,500 people to their population, their workforce participation dropped by 35,000. The overall participation rate declined to 65.3, with youth participation down 0.8%. So what does this mean for the economy? So previously, concerns focused on Canada adding population faster than the economy could create jobs. Now the issue shifted from job seekers to non-participants, meaning fewer people are even trying to enter the labor market. The structural shift remains a challenge for economic growth as a shrinking workforce reduces productivity and long-term economic expansion. What does that all mean to you, David? How do you think that's going to impact, I guess...
What does it all mean, Basil?
What
does it all mean, Basil?
What does it all mean?
Are you trying to grow your mortgage business? Centum has the tools and support to help you take your business to the next level. Get access to everything from free unlimited custom marketing to daily direct pay. Find out what your business can do with Centum. Learn more at joincentum.ca. Are you thinking of buying or selling a residential property? Relationships are at the heart of every real estate transaction. At Geltin Poirier Avocat Lawyers, we love to bring residential buyers, sellers, agents, lenders, mortgage brokers, and the law together to close the deal for you. For an effortless client experience that opens doors, call us at 613-744-4488 or visit our website at geltinpoirierlaw.ca. Let's get to the heart of your deal. Your home is one of your biggest investments, and the team at Big Westboro can help you protect it. Our expert brokers will find the perfect coverage to keep your home and belongings safe. Call 613-239-5792 or visit thebig.ca/Westboro for a free quote. Think big. Protect what matters most.
No matter what, a rising unemployment rate is never good. A stagnant one where you have non-participation from any age group or working age category is not a good thing. Effectively, them giving up on hunting for a job is not a good thing either. And that does just stagnate our economy. So it becomes a little bit more of a little bit of a challenge for economists because they're looking at, and the headline that people go off of ends up being that unemployment rate. So they are removed from that figure from Stats Canada. So it's not a true reflection, if you will, of what the true unemployment rate is. It's just that, they've given up looking. So they're not unemployed because they're not even looking right now, which is an issue. That means that there's not employers out there, hiring. There were some, on the news last week, there were a number of stories of, as tariffs were coming in, on, steel and things like that of labor companies preemptively laying off employees and saying, we're slow right now, but we anticipate it to be slower and we want you to get ahead of finding, new employment elsewhere, before they really kick in and others start really looking. So there were, some stories like that, that they were, talking about within Ottawa, at least. And so, I think it's interesting. It's certainly something to watch. Obviously, like these types of figures, the stuff going on with tariffs, kind of that, in and out of tariffs, they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off, kind of creates uncertainty and Canadians in general and people in general, the one thing they want is stability. And that's in their job, in their life, and payments and cost, everything. And so when there's instability, with the market and the market being, are there going to be tariffs or not? Am I going to have a job? Am I not? This plays into what the Bank of Canada is going to do, tomorrow, March 12th, I think, with, changing the overnight lending rate, which affects bank prime. But also for people wanting to dip their toes in the, in real estate, whether they're first time home buyer or whether they are, looking to purchase a bigger home for their family. I think there'll be some hesitation from people with the uncertainty of, not wanting to take the risk because they're perhaps, concerned about their job.
Yeah. And speaking of that, we saw a shift in leadership this week as well with Mark Carney being elected. I know we were kind of talking about that off air. So he's basically the incoming prime minister. His background, as far as our economy goes, former governor of the Bank of Canada, former governor of the Bank of England, chair of the Financial Stability Board. So he has a lot of experience in economics, which we're hoping, if elected, can significantly influence the Canadian economy. But what sort of things could you see, I guess, from this changeover? Because we've seen 9 years of leadership. Our economy has obviously been through a lot over the last 9 years with the pandemic and so on, and a lot of shifts in regulations and so on. So how do you see this incoming prime minister, I guess, shifting things? And, we're talking probably there'll be an election very soon. So, I mean, this whole conversation could be for nothing, but what sort of impact do you think his experience could have on the economy, I guess, as a whole?
I mean, yeah, they're saying that this morning that he's likely to be sworn in today as kind of the, I guess, prime minister, which is kind of odd, being as it's like a whole, it's completely different. I can't recall any time in our life in 40 years of this happening, but, maybe I'm wrong. And not having been elected by the population and just being like a prime minister being swapped out. But I don't think there'll be enough time to tell how it'll affect things, because based on where the polling is, the Conservatives and Liberals right now, led by Mark Carney, are neck and neck in the polls now. So I anticipate they'll call an election within the next week, I would think, and not delay on it while the polls are trending well. I mean, they could delay, they could come to an agreement with the NDP again and push off till October and try to give, some stability to argue the states. But I think it'll likely be an election that's called once he's sworn in. And so there's not enough time, I don't think, if that happens, to really give the market enough of a breathing room of, okay, well, there's secure leadership or government in place until that newly elected prime minister or party or renewed mandate by, to the Liberal Party, whatever it may be. I think at that point, then there'll be stability. But with all this going on with the states of hopscotch, that until, and that keeps getting pushed out until there's like that set government that can actually argue this and come to terms with the Americans, I think there's going to be instability for the next few months while we kind of figure out what's got tariffs, what doesn't, what we're retaliating on, what we're not,
yes.
and who the heck is going to be our sitting prime minister for now, because we've got provinces having to do their own things, that's where it becomes like very confusing for Canadians. You've got Ontario imposing tariffs to the US on electricity, but other provinces not doing the same, and kind of so I think that will ripple into the real estate market, but I think it will push the Bank of Canada's hand to continue dropping bank prime instead of holding.
Yeah, I mean, there's 13 U.S. states that border Canada, and all of them have some direct relation with that province that they border. So yeah, I agree. Like the fact that we haven't had a sitting government since January, I think mid-January, especially with all this stuff going on, is certainly not helping settle things. Like everything, as you said, is there's still many balls in the air of trying to figure it out. Speaking of Canadian Prime Ministers who took over midterm, so it's happened in our lifetime 3 times. John Turner, 1984, took over from Pierre Trudeau as leader of the Liberal Party.
Became the year I was born. Sorry, the year I was born.
Come on, David. Became Prime Minister but lost the general election. Kim Campbell, 1993, replaced Brian Mulroney as the PC leader.
Oh, yes.
Suffered a major defeat in the election that followed. Jean Chrétien to Paul Martin, 2003. Chrétien stepped down. Paul Martin, after winning the Liberal leadership, took over as Prime Minister 3 times. There you go. I wouldn't, maybe Kim Campbell. I remember that, but I wouldn't have guessed the other 2. So there you go.
Yeah, I forgot about Martin and Chrétien.
So one last thing I wanted to touch on before we get off here was another article talking about rent prices. So this has been something we've talked about multiple times, but they reached the lowest level since July of 2023 in February, falling 5%. So this was in the Canadian mortgage trends. It was an article. It says rent prices fall 5% in February, reaching lowest level since July 2023. So national trends. So the average rent in Canada fell to $2,088 in February, marking the 5th straight month of year-over-year declines. This 4.8% annual drop is the largest decline since April 2021. Despite the decreased rates, rents remain 16.9% higher than pre-pandemic levels and 5.2% higher than 2 years ago. Since February 2024, the average asking rent has dropped by $105 a month. So that's great to see. Key factors driving rent declines. So increased supply. So record high apartment completions are exceeding demand. Slower population growth. So fewer renters now entering the market. Supply and demand. Economic uncertainties. So risks of a potential trade war with the U.S. are affecting market conditions. So Ontario, which is, where we are, so it kind of drives the national rent decline. So Ontario saw the steepest rent drop with prices falling 4.2% year over year to $2,329. British Columbia was down 1%. Quebec was down 0.6%, who also recorded the rent declines. Provinces with rising rents. So anyone listening in Alberta, Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan, or Manitoba, here you go. Alberta, 1.4% up. Nova Scotia, 1.2% up. The biggest rent growth was in Saskatchewan, which was 5.2% up, and Manitoba, 3.4%. So the two most affordable provinces both saw rent increases. So major market highlights. Calgary saw the biggest drop of 7% year over year to 1916. Calgary kind of had a big boom there during the pandemic of a lot of people moving. Toronto rents fell 6.7% year over year to 2615. That's the 13th straight month of declines, hitting a 2.5-year low. Vancouver rents declined 4.8% to 2870, the lowest since April 2022. Montreal down 3%, Ottawa down 0.2%, Edmonton up 2.9%. So all this to say, rent prices are declining nationally by the looks of it, driven by increased supply and economic uncertainty. So I think overall that's good. I mean, ultimately, I think that supply was the biggest thing driving rent up. Like there's a lot of people that were shifting to renting and a lot of obviously migration and migration within Canada to these provinces that was driving up those rent prices. But I would expect, and I'm interested to hear your take, like I expect this to continue on a decline as things kind of balance out and as things settle. We should see rent, I would assume at least in our area, kind of settle around that, low 2000s.
As long as mortgage rates continue to come down, I think then that will allow rents to come down. We certainly saw a peak as people were having to see their variable rate mortgages hit their peaks and people, kind of worried about what that's going to look like. So I think we're going to see that drop because of that. And as people come up for renewal though, this year with those rental properties, some of those have had fixed rates though on their properties. So it will be curious to see those that keep their rentals and renew this year because of that huge population of mortgages or people and investors that are renewing this year and next. Whether they hold on to those rentals, and as they renew and their payments go up or arguably go up, depending on whether they lengthen out their amortization to help bring that cost down and timing of when they renew versus what their rate was when they bought, but it will be up. And so how that impacts things. Obviously they cannot, by law, you can't just arbitrarily, increase rents. So, if you're a renter listening currently, and your landlord just tries to increase your rent more than what's allowed, which is the inflationary rate. I think it's around 2% this year. Make sure to question that and look into it and speak to landlord and tenant board because they can't just increase your rent, by more than that, by that inflationary period or point rather. That's my biggest thing is just for rent. I think it's, a lot of it's based on that. Toronto obviously has a lot of vacant condos, so that's driving down that Toronto market. But they also saw an increase in property taxes by, I think it was 13% this year, to their property taxes. So that obviously...
Your numbers are pretty bang on, David. Rent increase guideline, 2.5% in Ontario. So you're right on the nose there.
But for Toronto, which drives a lot of Ontario's numbers, that's their rents are coming down because they had such a competitive landscape for trying to find tenants, and there's a lot of vacant properties, and it's much more competitive. But then they've also got the hard costs of their property taxes increasing double digits this year, kind of offsetting that. So hopefully, as people's mortgages mature and kind of roll over, that we don't see that uptick. Certainly driving it down and becoming more affordable is helpful for everyone.
Well, Dave, I think it's time for some boosts. What do you think?
Why not?
Are we at that time?
Why not?
Here we go. Okay. So
Actually, before you get into them, I do want to comment. We were called the Joe Rogan of real estate podcasts this past week, which was hilarious. So,
shout out to our boy John.
To John's wife.
Yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, John's wife. You know who you are if you're listening. Oh, that was pretty funny. At the conference, someone came up and like, "Oh, you guys host that radio show?" We're like, "A podcast," but yes, radio show for sure. Pretty funny. Okay, so I got. Let's go with 4 today. I'm just going to pull up the ones from my brother here. Great conference, by the way. Any agents that are considering a move, talk to David. Centum is and referral, obviously, but Centum is a great network to be a part of. Referral, great brokers should be a part of. I'm very happy to be part of Centum, and they really take care of their agents. So here we go. Okay, 4. Number 1, the past, the present, and the future walked into a bar. It was tense. It was tense. Number 2, a friend of mine is known for sweeping girls off their feet. He's an extremely aggressive janitor.
Okay.
Number 3, what do you call a chicken looking at lettuce? Chicken sees a salad. Chicken sees a salad. And last but not least, number 4, what do you call a belt made out of watches? A waste of time. Just like listening to these jokes. No, but I actually, to that point, I have to say this. I said I was going to say it on the air. To my client who reached out this week that listens to the show regularly, said they've been listening since episode 100. So very adamant, very, very eager, very loyal listeners. Said he listens all the way to the end, loves the mood boosts, says his wife now has bought him dad joke books just so he can have it. So they have a new 10-month-old and he's building his repertoire.
You might have to make a Torb dad joke book, a little table book.
Yeah, that would be hilarious.
Coffee table.
Yeah. Well, I think we should just make a reel, like a 1-hour-long reel of all the jokes from every episode. That would be at least 400 to 600 jokes in there.
And you can see all of my reactions all the same of.
That'll be the thumbnail for this episode. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week. And thanks to our sponsors, as always, Gertain Poirier, Avocat Lawyers, Big Insurance in Westboro, and Centum Canada. Thanks so much for your support. We'll see you next week. Deuces.